The blueprint.
My name's James, and for 12 years, I was a senior architectural drafter at a firm I'll call Vertex Design Collective. The place was all exposed brick, reclaimed wood, and glass-walled offices. We designed eco-friendly libraries, avant-garde community centers, you name it. The culture was aggressively progressive. Every email ended with a signature line of pronouns. We had mandatory mindfulness seminars, diversity luncheons, and a strict zero-tolerance policy for any form of discrimination. The irony is, I learned that policy only protected certain people. The trouble started when our team got a new manager, Lauren. Lauren was a recent hire from a big-name firm, brought in to shake things up and champion a culture of emotional intelligence. She was all about collaborative energy and holding space. My old manager, Rick, was a straightforward guy. If your drawings were accurate, on time, and to code, you were golden. Lauren wanted to talk about design philosophy and community impact in our weekly one-on-ones. Fine, I could adapt. I'm a quiet guy. I put on my headphones, blast post-rock, and get lost in the meticulous details of structural load diagrams and HVAC routing. I don't do a lot of chit-chat. I get my work done, I mentor the juniors when they ask, and I go home to my wife and kids. I'm not there to make friends, I'm there to build buildings that don't fall down. The first incident was subtle. Lauren called me into her office. "James," she said, with a concerned smile, "I've noticed you're sometimes disengaged during team brainstormings. Your energy can be a bit dismissive. We really value inclusive participation here." I was confused. I spoke when I had a technical contribution. I wasn't there to brainstorm the narrative of the stairwell. I said I'd try to contribute more. Then came the collaborative restructuring. Lauren dissolved our traditional project roles. Instead of a lead architect, a project manager, and drafters, we became pods of multi-hyphenate creators. My new pod consisted of me, a brilliant but utterly chaotic junior architect named Elise, and a recent hire, David, whose background was in experiential spatial design. He arranged art installations. We were tasked with drafting the schematics for a new public transit hub. A massive, complex job. In the first pod meeting, I tried to lay out the municipal code requirements, the foundational grid. Elise started talking about making the main concourse feel like a dandelion seed in a breeze. David suggested we incorporate kinetic sound sculptures into the support columns. I said, as politely as I could, we need to ensure the roof doesn't collapse before we decide what it sounds like. Let's start with the load-bearing metrics. Elise's face fell. David went silent. I was just doing my job. The next day, Lauren called me in again. This time, the smile was gone. "James, Elise felt you immediately shot down her ideas. That you created a hostile climate for innovation. She said your tone was patronizing and aggressively masculine." I was stunned. I'd said nothing about her being a woman. I'd questioned an idea, not a person. I was focusing on structural priorities, I explained. It was a technical correction. "It's how you correct, James," Lauren said. "You need to be more aware of your communication style. It can land as oppressive. We're starting a feedback circle for the pod. I expect you to participate openly and work on your empathy." The feedback circle was a weekly hour of hell. It was just the three of us, with Lauren moderating. Elise and David were encouraged to share their feelings about my communication. I was told I monopolized technical facts, that my silence felt judgmental, that my habit of pointing to errors on the screen with a pen instead of describing them was physically intimidating. I objected. "Lauren, this feels targeted. My work is accurate and on schedule. I've never raised my voice." "This isn't about your work, James," she said, as if explaining to a child. "It's about psychological safety. The team doesn't feel safe around you." The word, safe, became a weapon. My insistence on code compliance was rigid and unsafe. My preference for written instructions over verbal brainstorming was creating barriers to safety. I was given a performance improvement plan, not for my output, which remained flawless, but for my interpersonal impact. My mandate was to demonstrate vulnerable leadership and decenter my default technical authority. I started having anxiety attacks in my car before work. I documented everything, every nitpicky comment, every time my technical corrections were later adopted without credit after being dismissed as hostile. I went to our. The HR manager, Claire, listened with the same concerned smile as Lauren. When I finished my documented timeline, she leaned forward. "James, I hear you. But we have to take these perceptions seriously. 3 people in your pod have expressed concerns. We have to prioritize the group's emotional well-being. Have you considered that you might have some unconscious biases you need to unpack? Perhaps some therapy or coaching on toxic masculinity." I felt the floor drop out. Toxic masculinity. Because I liked precision. Because I spoke plainly. My 12 years of flawless service meant nothing. My identity as a quiet, technically minded man had been pathologized. The final blow came during the Transit Hub client presentation. Our pod was to present the schematic design. Lauren had spent weeks coaching Elise and David on storytelling. The slides were full of mood boards and poetic language about urban heartbeat and fluid movement. The senior client, a grizzled city engineer named Walter, listened for 10 minutes before holding up a hand. "This is lovely. Where are the beam calculations for the cantilevered roof? Where's the drainage plan for the main platform? The seismic retrofitting notes?" Elise and David froze, looking at Lauren, who looked at me. I had all of it. In a detailed, 50-page technical appendix I'd been told was too in the weeds for the main presentation. "James," Lauren said, voice tight, "perhaps you can assist." I pulled up the document. For the next 20 minutes, I walked Walter through the hard numbers. He nodded, asked sharp questions, and I had every answer. He left looking satisfied. I thought, for a foolish moment, I'd saved us. The next morning, I was called into a meeting with Lauren and Claire from our. Lauren spoke, her voice dripping with faux regret. "James, after the presentation, it's clear there's a fundamental misalignment. Your skills are deeply technical, but Vertex is moving towards a more holistic, human-centric model. The feedback from your pod is that your intervention, while factually helpful, was delivered in a way that undermined your colleagues and embarrassed the team in front of the client. You stepped outside the agreed presentation framework." I answered the client's questions, I said, my voice hollow. "You created a dynamic where you were the hero with the answers, and your team looked unprepared," Claire clarified. It was a classic example of the communication patterns we've discussed. I was being fired for being competent, for doing the job they'd hired me to do 12 years prior. My severance package was conditional on signing a document stating I'd undergone remedial coaching and chose to leave to pursue other opportunities. I signed it. I had a mortgage. The kicker, 6 months later, a former colleague told me the city engineer, Walter, had insisted I be reassigned to the Transit Hub project as a condition of moving forward. Vertex had to hire me back as a highly paid, remote-only contractor. They did. I now make twice my old salary, from my home office, with 0 feedback circles. They pay me a premium to do the exact work they once said made the team unsafe. The same people who pathologized my masculinity now have to justify my high billable hours to their finance department. I don't get invited to the mindfulness seminars anymore. I just send my drafts, collect my check, and watch my old team's holistic, human-centric design slowly get built according to my precise, oppressive, technically perfect schematics. The system didn't protect me. It labeled me a problem, broke me down, and then, when it absolutely needed my skills, commodified me. My story isn't about a villain, it's about a culture so obsessed with a certain kind of perception that it willingly blindfolded itself, saw a monster in the quiet man at the drafting table, and tried to put a "kick me" sign on his back. All while patting itself on the back for how emotionally intelligent it was.
Did you enjoy the story? Comment what you think about this story. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more.